Welcome to our podcast Geraumt on information design for architectural, urban and natural spaces, or as it's known in English, on environmental or sometimes experiential graphic design. My name is Christian Lunger. I'm a service designer and information designer from Austria, and we usually do our podcasts in German, but we have decided internally that we want to do English podcasts now as well, since there are so many inspiring stories out there that, from our point of view, should be shared. The reason being we're doing this podcast is that I have been on a study tour on immersive technologies in Dublin in November 2019. It took place over a whole week and was organized by Advantage Austria in Dublin. Thanks to the whole team for a really good organization, a fun week, and it really was inspiring. During that week I had the opportunity to meet Tim Keefe, head of digital of the Chester Beatty Museum in Dublin. We talked about his efforts to improve access and experience in the museum by including digital solutions. The talk took part end of November 2019 in Dublin, so enjoy.
My name is Tim Keefe. I'm the head of digital at the Chester Beatty. We're a small museum in Dublin, Ireland, and our collections are the private library of a really remarkable collector named Chester Beatty. This is his private library that was donated in trust to the Irish state on his death in 1968, and it encompasses one of the most, if not the most, remarkable personal libraries of historic manuscripts from all around the world. The collection includes European materials, a lot of materials from the Middle East, and materials from Southeast Asia. What it doesn't include much of is Irish materials, which is always surprises people when they come into Dublin, Ireland. Chester Beatty made his fortune mining, first in the U.S. and then he formed a company in England, and a lot of his activities occurred in Africa after that. And he was knighted in England, and then he became Ireland's first honorary citizen prior to his death.
How large is his collection?
The collection is approximately 20,000 different types of objects. And the collection we hold, he did have a large art collection, but what's part of our museum is largely the library-centric portion of the collection. But it does have some other objects that you don't expect to see in a library, like imperial dragon robes from China and a very large snuff bottle collection and other Asian materials.
So basically, it's only a small part of his collection that is at display at any time.
We were only able, because of the display spaces that we have within the museum, we're only able to display to the public usually 2 to 5% of the collection, depending upon what's on display within the gallery spaces, and then the rest is in storage.
I probably have to explain to our listeners how we met. We met actually yesterday for the first time during a presentation for the Irish Tourist Board. And I was quite impressed by your presentation because you were presenting how you use digital to enhance the real experience within the museum and within the library, to create, at least that's how I perceived it, to create a fully immersive environment. Can you tell us what kind of measures you took actually to integrate, or which kind of digital means you used to increase like the immersiveness of your environment?
Well, we're a very small organization, so I think what's most important for me building out new digital technology in the museum is primarily to make sure that whatever I'm doing is sustainable over time. As a small organization, every activity that we tackle really requires a significant amount of effort from everyone else in the museum staff. We have about 40 staff members, and every time I walk through the door, I'm bringing people new work. Digital departments and digitization departments really tend to sit exactly in the middle of the organization, and everything we do requires some other level of expertise, whether it be technical or non-technical. The creation of stories, the creation of accurate information, the ability to integrate with other systems and other activities that are happening in the museum is really core to what we do. The goal of my activities really is about expanding the experience. And my first thoughts when I came into the job, the department I have is a new department, 2 years old. When I first came into the job, the goal was very much to open the door to people who cannot travel to Dublin. I wasn't really thinking about immersive experiences. I was thinking about expanding access. And access to digital information is really becoming key. The term that's used is it's table stakes. It's a requirement for almost every institution, a heritage institution, to provide some level of access. There's a saying that's used that a lot of people don't like very much, but the saying that you often hear in universities is, if it's not online, it doesn't exist. And in some sense, that's becoming very true. The actual objects and visiting the museum, seeing them in person is a very important experience, and I think it's something that is only accentuated by online and digital activities, immersive activities. But the reality is that there is an expectation that people can see these things from their mobile device, from their computer, from the comfort of their home, even while they're traveling on holiday, to have a quick look at a museum before you walk into the door. Is it worth my time? Is this of interest to me? So those things, that type of access was really what we started thinking about.
It was at the beginning. It was about the communication, on creating interest for somebody who's making a decision when he's coming to a city. There's usually so much infrastructure you can look at. So how can you increase the exposure to your museum and tell them, you have specific amounts of time, please share it with us?
We're a smaller museum tucked in the back of the Dublin Castle compound. We're a bit hidden. We're in a good place in Dublin. People come to Dublin Castle. They come to Trinity and Guinness Storehouse. We're all in the general neighborhood, so there are a lot of different activities people can go to. And a lot of people, if they're not scholars or librarians, the idea of coming in and seeing old books might not be that appealing. But if they can get a look at the things we have and the remarkable artwork, the history and the legacy of these objects from across time and all across the world, it's quite remarkable. And it's interesting when we look at the comments that come back, people are absolutely surprised that they enjoyed it so much, because this might not really be something that would naturally interest them.
We just did a quick tour through the museums and some of the rooms, and I have to say, even though we couldn't spend a whole lot of time, I was quite impressed. And I'm really looking forward on how you will enhance the experience now with the digital. Although at certain amounts of time, it was like my personal feeling, I wouldn't even, taking out my smartphone, I'm not sure if I would have even done it, because there is such a treasure trove to look at. I wonder on your on the feedback you will get when you actually enhance this experience indoors as well. That will be very interesting.
It's going to be very interesting. I haven't mentioned yet, but in a few weeks we're going to be launching a new mobile application for Android and Apple phones. And we'll be, as part of that app, we'll be offering audio tours that are driven by a technology called Beacons, which is a Bluetooth technology that allows you to have positional sensing. So certain audio tours will be indicated to the visitor when they're in certain areas of the museum, targeting certain types of audio for certain spaces. I think I'm like you. I don't want audio tours. I tend to walk through museums and want to really think about things myself. I read some labels, I don't read other labels, or I read them very quickly. My wife, on the other hand, reads everything. Going to a museum with her is a very long experience, because that's what she loves to do. She loves to absorb all the information. Everyone's a bit different. So I think some people will walk through the museum and may not be interested in the app until after they leave. I become interested in things when I think about them. The next day I want to know more about something I saw. And that's where you could go back to the app and play the audio. You don't have to be in the room. You can just tap the app with your thumb and play the audio. Or one of the other features of the app is the 3D environments. You can take another tour through the museum space itself and actually look at the objects again.
I think there was quite an important, from my point of view, there was quite an important message now that is, it's not either or, it's both. So there will be people who don't use it, there will be people who use it. They have to live together in the same room, like for the customer experience. I think that's important. And as you said, the other function is to actually give something that is outside the room. So you have information available at another specific time where you actually want to receive people.
I think one of the things when we opened the department and I came to the museum, one of my greatest, what I thought would be one of my greatest challenges was to allow the organization to recognize a virtual visitor as a real visitor that's worth investing in. And for many organizations, that's a huge challenge because you actually have to invest in them. You have to build services, you have to spend money, you have to dedicate staff time to a person who may never in their entire lives walk through your door. They'll never spend money in your shop, they'll never go to the cafe, they'll very likely not post something on TripAdvisor. But it was important for me to allow the Chester Beatty as an organization to recognize this cohort of people as valid visitors to the museum and building tools for this set of people and recognizing the needs of those tools inside and, as you said, outside of the museum. And that's one of the challenges is actually rather than build two sets of tools, I'd rather build a single tool that can serve both communities. I was very lucky. I expected a bit of resistance to this idea and that did not occur here. People were very much willing to embrace virtual visitors, recognize them, count them, and we started reporting them right away using analytics and different methodologies to start counting them, talking about them, and looking at them as a more formal population of our users.
If you're talking about the digital visitor, do you have a specific age group in mind? Because digitalisation usually is, it's like it's more connected to younger people, which it is not like that. But I wonder if this is we want more younger people to recognize this kind of institution.
Well, museums, if you think about museums in a physical sense, your physical visitors, the people who walk through the door, it tends to be slanted towards older clientele. And it's slightly higher. The demographics say it's slightly more women than men. Mm-hmm. Interestingly, when we start looking at online tools like the website and the repository, we see that the gender is relatively balanced, and you tend to get young professionals. You tend to get people in their 20s to their 40s, which is actually a gap in the physical visiting. People tend to spend more time at museums as they get a little bit older. When you're younger, you do other things. It's not entirely, it's not exclusive, but we do tend to see a bit of demographics breaking out in the physical space. The digital space complements it almost perfectly, filling in the gaps that exist with the physical. So when you look at the whole population, you really have a nice range across the socials, across the entire society. So.
I would like to come to another topic which impressed me at your presentation yesterday. That was your efforts to digitalize the space, so the different exhibitions. So you actually can visit a room online. You can walk within the room. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
So we started doing what I'm describing as navigable 3D environments. They're 3D, we use a specialized camera to build a 3D model of the space and overlay high-resolution photographs on top of the 3D model, so you can actually navigate and virtually walk through the space. And you're seeing, in relatively high quality, what the museum space is. It really is the next best experience to visiting the museum itself. And we brought in the camera equipment to do that, and we work with a cloud provider to build the models and host the activity. When we decided to do this, what was very important for us was to make sure that it was sustainable financially and technically over time. Oftentimes we'll get a grant to buy some equipment, But the problem is a year or two later, if you're required to have specialized staff, if you're required to spend a lot of money in upkeep or have a lot of technical post-processing work associated with the activity, it's really not something we can sustain. But today, a lot of these services using cloud-based resources or software as a service-based resources allow an effectively amateur user to be able to do something quite dynamic. I spent the morning doing 3D scans of the roof garden. I did that this morning, and it was a bit of a learning process. It works a little bit differently outside than it does inside. It's a technology that's largely designed for indoor spaces, but it was very manageable, very approachable. I'll process the images probably later today, and then I'll send them to the cloud service to build the final models. And it's quite fantastic. We're doing our virtual exhibitions right now. The museum holds temporary exhibitions that last for about 6 months. And an exhibition tends to be a bit more than just a display of objects. There's usually a story that's being told. Labels and storytelling occur through graphics on the walls, and it really is a curated experience through using a set of museum objects to convey some very specialized information and a type of storytelling, really. It's very hard to document that, to archive that over time, but we can actually document the entire exhibition exactly as it is in the room.
That's probably quite an interesting topic, because you said you're actually doing it by yourself. You have researched and you have bought the equipment, which is easy to handle, which is easy to integrate in your process, in the content creation. And that's something I saw, is that there's actually two digitalization processes going on. The one is digitalizing the room, the space itself, and the other one is digitalizing the exhibits. So I tried it yesterday with my mobile phone, even during your presentation, and it worked quite well, because you could walk inside the room, and once you found out what to do, you actually had a direct link to the exhibit, so you could actually zoom into the exhibit and watch at the details of a specific script, of a specific drawing. How is that done in your organization? Because that's probably, by so many exhibits that you have, that's probably a long amount of time or effort to actually do that.
That was another side to the department that we started. We brought in, one of the goals of the organization is to do two-dimensional photography, very, very high resolution photography, as archival digital documentation of the museum collections. So the goal over time is to digitize everything we have and make that openly available to the public online. To date, we've done, I think, somewhere in between 12 and 14% of our collection objects have been digitized, and we continue to work on this. Most museums national libraries, archives are doing this kind of work. It's a really big topic. There's a lot of funding going on, and it's really quite important. It's important for a variety of reasons. The first level of importance, as I already mentioned, was access. Just allowing people from all over the world access to what you have. We have a collection of objects that have come from everywhere else. We don't have Irish objects. We have collections of objects from literally all over the world, and allowing communities and members of those communities to see their own national heritage that we're lucky enough to host in Ireland is a fantastic opportunity for scholars, for students, for just even the general public. We made our content open access, and anyone can go and look. They can download JPEGs of the individual pages or PDFs of the whole volumes, and that's open for everyone for non-commercial use. The other important reason is from a preservation standpoint. If you think about what happened in Paris, if you think about what happened in Brazil with the terrible fires, I imagine that the very first questions that were asked the next day is, what's digitized? It can be a wonderful record of last resort if something happens to the object. The other thing is, if you're doing it well, you're capturing a moment in time. These objects are very old, and they change over time. If you have a manuscript that's 1,000 years old, it doesn't look like it did at the point in time it was 10 years old. It doesn't look like it did at the point in time it was at 500 years old. If things are cared for well, that change happens very, very slowly, but time will always take an effect on the object. And we're showing a moment in time. And that's really important from an idea of scholarship. We're showing the state of an object that may not be the same when someone chooses to look at it again in the future.
For me, again, there were a couple of good messages in there, but one which I think is especially important is we were talking a lot about visitors and how it can enhance the experience of visitors, be it before they come to the museum or if they're in the museum, but we're talking about scholars as well, or heritage foundations, which are really keen on having the material available. So digitalization, I hope, please correct me if I'm not correct, so the whole digitalization process actually helps this kind of community as well to better understand the work and maybe even find new knowledge that we haven't had before.
It goes even further than that. It really gives them access in ways they wouldn't have otherwise. Only the highest level scholars can get grants to go and take their summer and travel to Ireland to sit in our reading room and ponder over a medieval manuscript from someplace, or an Islamic Quran, or plates from a jade book, or one of the wonderful things that we have. And even now, because of digitization, because of online access, less and less funders are paying for that. They'll often pay to have something digitized and put online when in the past they would have paid for a scholar to travel to Dublin to see it before that was an opportunity. So it's really becoming expected for organizations to do this kind of activity and to provide access. When I started doing this work at another institution 12 years ago, the question was, who are these people and what are they going to do with our stuff? Today, when I come here, the question is, hurry, get the stuff out, give it to everyone. It's very, very different. There used to be a very protective mentality to digitization. And today there's a really wonderful philosophy of sharing, and the provision of access is important to all different kinds of organizations from all different kinds of places. It's very rare to find organizations that are scared of people having access, because it's a change in practice.
I would like to, every listener, if he has listened until now, knows there were a couple of very important messages and learnings that you provided regarding digitalization. But I still want to pose the specific questions that I have prepared is, if you'd consult a similar organization or other organizations who are standing before the same decisions that you were standing a couple of years ago, what would you recommend them to do or to look at before they start the whole process?
I think as a starting point, you have to ground your ideas in reality. And for most organizations, reality requires you to think about the business term as total cost of ownership, TCO. The idea of how are you going to manage this in 10 years? What is it going to cost you in 10 years? Can you feasibly manage it? It's really easy to get a grant. Well, it's not really easy, but it's generally reasonable to get a grant to fund a great project, to do something wonderful. But if you can't sustain it over periods of time, it's a waste of your time. And many, many projects just die on the vine because they don't have subsequent funding 3 or 4 years after they're done. And almost everything you do is going to need to be refreshed with new content, either to make it look, it'll start looking dated and old, or people will just get tired of seeing the same thing over and over again. So everything I do I think about sustainability over time, and I think about it in 3 different ways. I think about it financially, I think about it technically, and I think about it from a staff workload. And the staff I'm considering are not just my own, they're staff all across the organization, most of which who have nothing to do with technology. And those are the 3 criteria I really explore. You also have to be very careful to look at organizations that are honestly your peers. Everyone likes to compare themselves to someone who's maybe a little bigger or a little better funded than they are, as kind of the exemplar, the best place to look at. And they're usually very easy to talk to, and they've usually done some pretty fantastic things because their budgets tend to be a bit bigger, their technical staffing is bigger, and their general staffing load is bigger, and they can handle a bit more work. But it's very important to look at organizations that are honestly close to you and what they're able to accomplish, and ask them the tough questions. Ask them the questions about how they manage these things over time and what worked and what didn't work and where did they waste money. Because everyone wastes money doing things they shouldn't have done, or if they had to do it again, they would do it differently. So I would say those are the things that are really important. And then the only other thing to be very important of is you have to be really cautious around trends and fads. There are things that show up in the news and are being talked about, and everyone wants to do them. Virtual reality is the current thing. And is it the right time to do it? Is the technology mature enough? Is it actually going to add the kind of value to your user experience? It's very easy to get caught up in the technology and not think about what you're actually trying to do with the technology, and is this the right way to do it?
What I heard in your presentation yesterday, that you actually, regarding the three thoughts that you shared, financially, technically, and for the staff. One thing you did, which I found quite interesting, is that you don't create everything externally. But this was German now. But you actually look at available products, because they're lower regarding the costs, for example. And what I found quite intriguing is that you go with this strategy and you see how you make it possible to create your own content. Again, total cost of ownership on different levels. How was your experience with that?
Because we're a small organization, and because also we're a government organization, I can't just hire someone. It's really tied to the political process, our ability to hire. So we're quite limited with people, particularly around technology, because those roles don't already exist in our organization. We're not a large business with a technical staffing complement that would exist in some department or other. So it's very important for me to find solutions that I can manage over time. So our ability to change content. One of the unique features of our museum that's very makes my job very difficult is that almost everything that's on display is rotated out once a year, because materials on paper and skin are very sensitive to environmental conditions like light exposure. So everything is rotated out. So any content I generate, I need to recognize that the objects that it's referring to may not be on display in a year, and I'll have to generate new content. So the ability to generate content internally, regularly, to refresh content, to keep it from getting stale, all of that's very important. I'm looking more and more towards cloud solutions and software as a service solutions, because it's the only way I can really afford to do that. If I decided to, the app that we're going to be launching is a software as a service function. It's a core technology that a variety of different companies use that's been customized to be our own look and feel and do our own kinds of things. But it's really based off of a core technology that I have to share with another museum in Dublin, actually, which is fine. And I have to be comfortable with that. If I wanted to build an app myself, I would have to first spend the money. I would have to hire a number of developers and have them develop. It would probably take a year to do it. And then I would have to always have at least one developer on staff to keep it up to date, to maintain it. Even if I just bought the development of a brand new app from a company, it would cost many times more than what I spent on the app here. And it's just not sustainable for us. And then we still run into these ongoing costs of dealing with maintenance over time. And if you think about how many times you have to hit that update button on your phone, I hit it at least once a week, and there's usually 10 or 15 different apps that are getting updated because of one reason or another. So
you told me yesterday, I hope I remember correctly, that it took you 30 minutes only. You did it by yourself, one of the temporary exhibitions. You digitalized them, and it took you how long?
Depending upon the room, the temporary exhibition room that we have up on our website right now is a pilot. It took me probably about 30 minutes to do the scanning, and then probably another 30 minutes to, you have to do some markup work on the scan that was made, and then you send it up into the cloud and it was ready. The more time consuming part was actually putting the tags in, putting the information in, and that's a function of cataloging essentially. And that probably took 3 or 4 hours. But the actual scanning, the physical photography of the space took 30 minutes.
Just as an explanation to our listeners, this digitalization camera Tim is talking about is actually photogrammetry camera. So it doesn't only take the photo, but it takes all the measures as well.
Yeah, it makes a 3D model using it uses laser measuring point cloud, builds a point cloud of the space, and then does photography and wraps the 3D space with the photography. So it really allows the immersive environment to be quite natural when you're doing the navigation through the space. Please go onto our website and take a look at it. It's at chesterbeatty.ie. And it's associated with the Thai Buddhist Tales exhibition and the Mani exhibition. They're both up on the website. I think it's the front page right now. We will be putting up new scans of the entire museum space with the app, and we'll be putting them online shortly thereafter. So there'll be more as well.
I think that's a good point to tell everybody that we will put quite a couple of information, the website and everything, in the show notes. And if you have some information, Tim, can they contact you?
They can contact me and come for a visit. If you're in Dublin, it really is a remarkable experience. I've worked in archives, and I was dragged to museums as a child when I only wanted to go to Disneyland, and this is a really remarkable space. We're a small museum, but the collection is really, really quite remarkable, and it covers so many different areas of the world, all different religions. There's probably something that you're interested in that we have. So
I do support that sentiment. Even if you're not interested in digitalization, you should come and see that museum once you're in Ireland, and in Dublin, of course. It's really impressive, especially for information designers and book designers. It's unbelievable what kind of work was out there over the centuries, not even more as centuries.
It is the conveyance of information. I mean, you really can see, for information designers, really looking at texts, looking at manuscripts, which were the communications and teaching schools since the beginning of time. We go from cuneiform tablets to modern prints, and it's quite remarkable. We were looking at some of our objects were actually teaching people how to determine the correct times and directions to pray to Mecca. It was for Muslim people of Muslim faith, and it's actually navigational design from hundreds of years ago. It's quite fantastic.
I'm just looking at the questions. We're basically coming to an end. The final question that I prepared was, what kind of feedback did you get from different stakeholders that you're working with regarding these digitalization processes or digitalization tools?
We have had really, really positive feedback. When I came in, the work that the department has done, we started with the new website. Then we built the digital image repository, which was designed specifically for the 2D digitization of the museum collections, and that's kind of a scholarly resource. And now we're working on the app, and in conjunction with that, we're doing the 3D museum spaces and the audio tours, the beacon-driven audio tours. People have been really, really impressed. The website has won an award, a national award for its design. And, you always get one or two people who say, I hate it, put the old one back. And we did get one or two people like that. But overall, it's been surprisingly positive. One of the things I did after we launched the new resources is that I put a hold on any updates for anything that wasn't broken. So if there was a true bug, something that wasn't functioning right, I would fix it. immediately. But for any design changes, anything someone internally said, I don't like it, I would like it this way, 6 months, we made no changes. We did that quite purposefully. The idea is that because we made big change, because these new resources were a very big change for people, I wanted them to live with change for a while. Because immediately people don't like change. People always struggle with change. And the idea that you are forced to live with something and get used to it, and then you can have a much more rational thought process around what actually doesn't work for you and how you would like it to be differently. And I think that was very successful, because the comments, mostly from staff, those were the primary comments, changed from week 3 to 6 months in. They were very different comments, and now we're correcting the things that they're asking us to correct, or not even really correct, but just do things a bit differently. So I would definitely recommend that process. That was very, very helpful, because everyone has a lot of ideas when something is brand new, but once they've lived with it for a while, they distill their ideas into the ones that are actually important.
So maybe as a closing point, what are your next steps regarding your digital strategy? Can you share your ideas regarding that?
Yeah. So the app is going to launch shortly, and it is version 1, so we'll be adding new things. We are looking at using beacons to gamify the museum experience for visitors to the physical museum, to really make it a little more child-friendly. The other thing we can do, we're going to be adding multiple languages to the app over the next few months. We're going to be adding Irish, German, Spanish, Italian, and French to the app. And then if we can find the budget for it, we'll be adding formal Arabic, Mandarin, and Japanese as well, a little further along. One of my next stages is really looking at new ways digitally of conveying information within the museum space through interactive signage of different type, touch screens. We'll be exploring that, and I don't really know where that's going to go. It's a beginning exploration to see how can we better provide a more intellectually accessible experience and visually accessible experience to people who visit the museum. So I think that's going to be the next big thing. Along the website, we'll be looking at e-commerce for the shop and some of the kind of run-of-the-mill things, which they're important to us as an organization, but I think from in the grand scheme of things are kind of business as usual things. So.
Great, thank you very much. So say thanks for sharing your thoughts with me, with us. I think, again, I now listened to basically 2 presentations of your digital strategy, and I've learned at both of them. So thank you very much for your time. And I hope you have ongoing success with your strategy and, of course, with your library.
Thank you very much.
I hope you enjoyed this talk as much as I did. As ever, send us your recommendations to podcast@geraumt.com. You can find all additional information in our show notes, and in the future we are planning to showcase more English podcasts. So I hope until next time, servus.